I still get the FOMO.
Well, we need to build that same type of FOMO for Spire. We need to figure out how to get people like just as rabid for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody who's listening later to the podcast. Welcome to our weekly community chat, dev update / community podcast, where we sit down with Tail, talk about what happened this week, and also anyone who wants to come by from the community and chat and ask questions is more than welcome to as well. But yeah, so far we have some really cool stuff to talk about today. So yeah, I'm gonna let Tail give us a quick update on what they want to get into today.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, this week I've been working a lot on the Dungeon Creator. I've been working a lot inside Godot, but also a lot outside of Godot. So that's a little bit what I want to talk about this week or today. And I also have a little bit of a surprise at the end. The Dungeon Creator, like we talked before, is a very crucial tool for us to create various levels and challenges that players will face throughout the entire game. And it will not just be a tool that will be used for us, but also by the community itself, so they can be as creative as they want and show other people their games and play those games with each other. This week, I've been designing and implementing interactable assets that players will encounter in these dungeons. Interactable assets are game objects or elements within the game environment that can be interacted by the player in some way. These assets could be anything from a button that opens a door to a weapon that the player can pick up and use to defeat specific animals, specific enemies that need that specific weapon, for example. The key feature of interactable assets is that they respond to the player's input or actions in some specific way. For example, a lever might cause a bridge to extend when pulled, and then they will be able to cross that bridge to go to a specific hidden area. Or a pressure plate that you might accidentally or on purpose step on that might open and hit a door when stepped on. And these types of interactable assets are to be reused in various places by either us or the players. Interactable assets might also have some form of state or condition that affects how they respond to the player. For instance, a locked door might require the player to find a key before it can be opened. So then both the door and the key are basically interactable assets in that sense, even though the door is the only actual interactable thing. Those assets are especially important as they can be used to create a variety of challenges and specifically puzzles that players must overcome. These puzzles give a little bit of a variation in what you're doing. You're not just killing enemies. You're not just trying to find things. You're also trying to figure out how to get to specific places in a dungeon. We can create a rich and immersive game world that encourages exploration and experimentation, and that keeps players engaged and interested in the game. It also creates a little bit of replayability, because you might do a dungeon and not interact with specific assets, but then afterwards you hear from other players or you hear from friends, look what I found, there's a hidden door and there's more loot there, and then you might want to do that dungeon again to figure out what kind of loot you could find there. Or maybe there's always the same kind of loot behind a specific door and you want that loot as well. And in the case of our Dungeon Creator, interactable assets also require a database to function properly. That's something I've been working mostly on for this week. These assets can have various attributes that define their behavior and properties, such as name, description, appearance, functionality, and relationships with interactions with other assets in the game. So A database is a structured collection of data that is used to store and manage our game-related information. This data can include everything from character stats to inventory items to game settings and player progress. A database can be used to keep track of any information that is relevant to the game and its mechanics. Even though most of our player progress will actually be stored on the blockchain, most relationships will be stored in the database. So the database will be a centralized entity that will know what asset does what happens when the player does something. And that also means that because it's in our database, it's easily tweakable and easily balanceable. Let's say we have that same lever that opens a door or extends a bridge. That lever would need to have a database entry that specifies its name and appearance, but also the relationship with the door that it's actually connected to. The door itself would then also need a database entry with the relationship with the lever, because a lever might open multiple doors, but you might also need multiple levers for one specific door. In addition to these basic attributes, interactable assets might also have more complex behaviors or properties that require additional data to be stored. For example, a trap might have a database entry that specifies its trigger conditions, its effects on the player, and maybe even its cooldown time. A puzzle might have a database entry that specifies its solution conditions and its rewards and, for example, its difficulty level. By using a database to store all this information, we can easily keep track of all the different interactable assets in the game and their respective properties. We can also modify or add new assets to the game without having to hard code them in the actual game itself. And this allows us to create a more flexible and scalable game that can be easily modified or expanded as needed. And that also means that if we, for example, make, I'm just spitballing here, but if we, for example, make a mobile game, like a mini game, we can use that exact same information that we're using in the actual game because we can connect to the same database. And if you would hard code all these values in the actual game itself, then I would have to hard code them in the mobile game as well. And then every time you make one change, you would have to change them in both source codes. For this database that stores our interactable assets, we have also built an API. For those that don't know, an API is a set of protocols, routines, and tools that allow different software applications to interact with each other. In the context of game development, an API can be used to provide other developers with a way to access our game-related data, such as those game assets or specific mechanic data and relationships. This means that other developers can build on top of our assets and create new features, create new mechanics and content for their specific dungeons without having to start from actual scratch. And they could also make their own mini games with the storyline and information that we are using in Spire. So, for example, let's say that another developer wants to create a new type of trap for his custom-made dungeon in Spire. They can use our API to access the database and retrieve all of the information about the existing traps in the game, such as their trigger conditions and effects. They can then use this information to create a new trap that fits seamlessly into the game's mechanics and world. This allows for a lot greater collaboration and innovation within the game development community and can lead to the creation of more complex and engaging games that actually fit in our mechanics and actually fit in our game itself. And I've been thinking about this a lot this week, and this also gives us the ability to create events for this. We can make a hackathon where you have, for example, a week or a weekend or 2 weeks the time to create a specific feature, a specific trap, or a specific mechanic that fits in our game with actually our information. and because of this API, you get a really good access to this information, and we can make these hackathons, and those that win, we can even eventually maybe implement them in our game as canon lore or as canon traps. We want the dungeon creator to have an ease of use of the likes of, for example, Sims. Sims is a popular life simulation game that is known for its user-friendly interface and their game mechanics. And the game allows players to create and customize their own virtual world, complete with characters, complete with homes, neighborhoods. But the game's interface is so easy to use that players of all ages can play with it. And you get into the game and you basically know exactly what you have to do from the first second. We want to capture some of this same magic in our dungeon creator by creating an interface that is easy to use, and we want players to be able to quickly and easily create their own dungeons using our tools and using our API. And I'll talk a little bit more in a few about why I just said API, because API isn't an easy to use asset for non-developers, but we'll get to that. But to achieve this, we plan to use a variety of interface design strategies that are similar to those used in The Sims, or maybe even various browser sim games like Settlers Online or Travian. For example, we will use easy drag and drop interfaces that allow players to quickly and easily place these assets in the game world. Will make an intuitive, easy to use menu with categories, and everything will make sense straight away. You won't need explanation to know what it is, why it is, where to place it. We will also use a variety of customization options that will allow players to tweak the functionality of the assets with an easy to use menu, making it very easy to create unique and engaging dungeons. In addition to these interface design strategies, we will also incorporate specific gameplay mechanics that are similar to those found in The Sims. For example, in the future, we may include a feature that allows players to see how their dungeon is being used by the adventurers who actually explore it. That will not be through a video but you'll be able to see the data and you'll be able to see the statistics of the dungeons that are being played. That means that you know exactly where players are going to, what they're doing, what they're not doing. And for future dungeons that you're creating, you will be able to think about what works and what didn't work. So in addition to designing the assets, I've also been working on setting up the interactions between them. While APIs are very powerful tools for interacting with game data, they can also be very complex and very intimidating for people who are not actually familiar with programming or web development or game development. To make it a little bit easier for non-technical users to work with our API, we have created a backend portal that provides a user-friendly interface for accessing and modifying our game data. This backend portal is essentially a web-based tool that allows users to interact with the game's database without actually having to write any of the code themselves. It provides a very graphical interface that displays all of the game assets and allows users to add, modify, or delete them using simple forms and simple menus. We also have created an API for this system that's specifically for developers, but I've been brainstorming this with a couple of developers of ours, and we've been saying maybe other developers would love to create an actual visual interface of this. So instead of forms, instead of like input fields, people could actually drag and drop database entries and basically have some sort of dungeon creator within the database itself. And that way, really everyone can make everything they want within this database, as long as it's between the limits that we set, obviously. And Sid, you've already seen a little bit of our backend and what we can do with it.
That's really cool. Yeah, I've been loving those screenshots that you sent over. I don't understand all of what I'm looking at because I'm not like on that level with my coding knowledge, but it's really cool to see like some of the stuff that you've implemented, and yeah, can't wait to see it all in action, see what people can do once they're able to start like playing around with it.
Yeah, and so the thing is like, yes, I want to make it as easy as possible. Yes, I want to make it as clear as possible, and I want to make it as fast as possible. But this is one of the reasons why, especially game development, takes such a long time, and it takes a very long time before you can actually see what's happening, because you're first making everything that's on the back end. You're first creating everything, like how it works and why it works the way that it works. And it takes a long time. So let's say that a game designer wants to add a new interactable asset to his dungeon in the game, such as a new type of puzzle. They can then log into the backend portal. They can navigate to the puzzle section in the interface. And from there, they can simply click on a button to add a new puzzle, and a form will appear that allows them to enter all the relevant information about the puzzle. And it will require you to input a couple of things that you might not have thought about before. But in order for the puzzles to work correctly, you need to fill in all the fields that are in that form. Such as, for example, like the solution conditions. By creating a backend portal for our API, we can make it very accessible and user-friendly for people who might not be as familiar with working with APIs and databases, like, for example, you. This can help to increase the collaboration and the participation within the game's development community and allow more people to contribute to the creation of a very rich and engaging game world. So this the dungeon creator is a very important tool for creating levels and challenges for players to face. But once a dungeon has been created, then it's possible to export this dungeon in a format that can be used within the game. However, we also want to make sure that the dungeon is easily to be shared and it can easily be sent to other players. And if I export the actual game scene and I send it to someone who has no idea how it works, then that player obviously has no idea what to do with the file that it's just been sent. So to achieve this, we use a seed to refer to the dungeon data. This seed is unique to each dungeon format, and it's built by the position of all of the assets placed in the dungeon. The game will then recreate this dungeon based on the seed that you've sent. So if I export my dungeon, I basically get a long string of characters, and it kind of looks like a scrambled password. I can then send that string to you. You can import it in the game, and then the game knows, based on that seed, where to place all the tiles in the game and where to place all the assets in the game. And it's kind of a similar way that Minecraft works. In Minecraft, the entire world is also built on a seed, and that seed is randomly generatable, and that way I can go out of the game, generate a new seed, play the game again, and suddenly I have a completely new world. If I really love that world, I can save that seed, send it to my friends, and then we can join the same server, all based on that seed. And then the world is generated exactly the same as how I played it before. When they imported the dungeon data. From there, they can edit specific relationships within the dungeon, such as modifying those interactable assets and adjusting the difficulty level of the dungeon. So even after you import the seed, you can still decide to edit the dungeon afterwards. So that also creates a little bit of collaboration. So I can create a dungeon, then I can say, oh, this works really well. And then I send it to you. You edit that dungeon even further, and then you send it back to me. And that way we can like ping pong together and we can go back and forth with ideas. All of these assets and interactions will be placed into the dungeon creator, which is essentially the tool that allows us to design the levels and encounters that the players will face. By using this tool, we ourselves can create these various dungeons as well. So it's not just for a community, it's for us as well. We create the storyline in a specific way, but various side quests or various dungeons, we want to create this in a very ludicrous, in a very easy and intuitive way as well. And if we can create everything through that creator, then everyone else can as well. So as game developers, we want to create that rich and immersive world for players to explore. One of these things that we're using to create such a rich and immersive world is through our lore. Like we've talked about this before. We're creating a novel to achieve a sense of personality. We have created 6 adventurers, each with their own unique backstory and with their own unique personality. Players will encounter these throughout the game. Players will eventually be able to play these characters throughout the game. And to help players better understand the history and the motivations of these adventurers, we also plan to launch a couple short stories that delve deeper into the past of these adventurers. These short stories will provide players with more context about the world that they're living in, and they will give them a way better understanding of the struggles and challenges that the adventurers have faced before the lore. By providing players with this extra context and backstory, we can help to create a much more engaging game world, one that feels a lot richer with history and character. And it will also help to generate interest in the novel that we're planning to launch after the game has been released, which will then the novel will actually explore the world and the characters in even greater detail. And we will start sharing these stories once every month starting April. And every short story will be about one specific adventure.
Yeah, that's definitely a couple of really cool updates there. Yeah, that's going to be awesome. I'm excited for the short stories because I feel like that's going to get everybody much more invested in what's happening. You can hear about the world and you can kind of envision it and it's cool, but once you actually start getting characters and you start hearing about your party that you're going to be playing around, that kind of adds another dimension to it. I think it'll get everyone really excited.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I've noticed a lot more recently, the importance about the actual story. Because a game like, we've talked about this before we started, a game like Diablo 4, even without me knowing what the mechanics are, even without me knowing whether it's a good game, yes or no, I still want to play it because I really want to know what's happening in the story. And I really want to know what's happening with Lilith, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means that apart from the fact that I've played Diablo my entire life, and apart from the fact that it's kind of a nostalgic thing, what really drives me to play it is the lore, not the gameplay. Because if it were a completely different kind of game, but with the same lore, I most likely would have still been playing it because of that lore. And it's also one of the things that makes games like Last of Us such a good game. It's because the story is so intense, because the story is so good.
I think for me, it's like getting into games like, I know Dark Souls, a lot of people don't really look at Dark Souls as like, oh, it's super lore heavy, but like once you start getting into the lore behind the items and the way they build it, that for me, like, I don't care how much I die or how frustrating it is, or even how broken they are a lot of times. Like some of the FromSoft games are kind of buggy, but it's like, you just keep coming back to it because you get invested in the story of why you're there and why you're doing it. So even though it's a very different type of game, it's kind of that same thing of like, I keep going back because every time I do, I learn a little bit more about the world. I learn a little bit more about a character or an NPC, or, I pick up little tidbits. So just kind of keeps feeding the addiction.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like the difficulty that's actually getting you back. But for example, me, like I really hate the difficulty in Dark Souls games. Mm-hmm. Because I just suck. As simple as that.
Everybody sucks at those.
It can also work the other way, because I've been playing Hogwarts as well, and even though that's a really good game, I personally feel that the lore is kind of repetitive. The lore is kind of empty. Like it's growing on the lore that already exists, but I expected way more from it. That expectation being disappointed like that actually got me away from that game rather than wanting me to come back for more lore. So it can also work the other way around.
Honestly, I've been getting sucked back into Minecraft, funnily enough. I haven't played it for a couple of years, and they'd done so many updates to it. I've just kind of hopped back on because I was really tired and I wanted to play something, but I was just like, I just want to not have to think too much. So I just started a new Minecraft world and was kind of puttering around, and I kept finding like, oh wow, there's new caves. Oh wow, there's new ore. Oh, there's bees now. They've just added so much stuff.
That's the thing that I love so much about those types of games. Like exactly what you said. You would just want to shut your brain off for a moment and just be able to play and just be able to create something.
That's so fun. And I can just, I usually play on survival mode, but it's like my wife sometimes will hop on and just put it on creative, like no enemies, no anything. And she'll like make a garden or like build her little dream cabin or something like that. It's just a nice way to wind down.
And I kind of want to create the same entry point of that within Spire as well. Like that's why that's one of the reasons why I created this dungeon creator, and I'm actually thinking of calling it creative mode as well, because it just gives you the ability to create a world and to create. It's not as interactive as Minecraft, for example. Like you're not walking around, you're not actually going there to play something. Right. But you're still creating your own little world. You're still creating your own little idea that you like maybe had in your head before, or you just thought about it, or maybe you're just winging it and just seeing where you're getting, and maybe it won't even make sense, you know. And a couple years back, I was playing Mario, and Mario also has this level designer where you can create your own Mario level, and then it basically gets approved automatically if you yourself can finish that actual level, because otherwise you can just create the most like insane level and have everyone play it, and everyone just gets frustrated, but there's actually no way to win it, you know.
That's not fair.
So as long as you can win that level yourself, then it's basically automatically approved, because that means that it's a level. It doesn't have to be fun to be approved. It has to be a level that you can do from start to end. And I kind of want to use that same system with Spire as well, because I really like that.
I think that's a good way to do it. Yeah, that way you don't have people just, if if people want to create really smart and intricate dungeons, they have to be smart enough and have enough understanding of the systems themselves to be able to put it together in a way that's actually going to work. They're not just going in and throwing stuff basically just throwing stuff against the wall and hoping that something sticks and hoping that it's fun. They actually have to sit down and put time into like understanding the different mechanics of the game. So yeah, I think that would make it a lot more. It would definitely ensure the quality of the experience.
Yeah, and sure, there will be a lot of games that are very easy or a lot of games that will be very short, but it's okay. That's like people want to create that. People maybe want to replay that. Maybe people create something, play it themselves once, and then just never think about it again. Like, they just throw away the seed and that's it. But for the people that actually want to get invested in creating their own level, they have the freedom to do that. And they have the freedom to share that with other people. They have the freedom to create an NFT out of that seed, to sell that level. And like it's all about the ability to do something. It doesn't have to ensure that you're creating a fun level. It doesn't have to ensure that you're creating a very difficult level. You just want to ensure that people can create whatever they want. How easy or how difficult, that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I love that. Having it just more about creative freedom. It sounds great.
And it kind of like spins my head around as well as a creator myself. Like, I have so many shower thoughts that like, I want to add this, I want to add that, I want to add this, and yeah. Like there's like in the future, like I have no idea when I will be able to actually create that. But in the future, I also would love to create a multiplayer version of this creative mode, so that the two of us, for example, could create one dungeon, but not by ping-ponging it around, but by joining that one instance at the same time and just go over voice chat. And then sometimes I see an asset just flying around, and that's you that selected that asset and placed it somewhere else, Then you can actually have a community served level created. I would love to create that.
Well, thank you everyone for hanging out for the podcast today. A lot of really cool updates, and it's just every time we have these, I get more and more excited for the progress of the game, because it just sounds more and more like community-based and collaborative. And yeah, it just sounds like, as community manager, it's going to be probably one of the funnest projects I've worked on. So definitely excited to have another chat with Tail, and looking forward to next week. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you there.